So now I'm going to switch over to our opening session today. Well, I think it's our opening and final session today, and introduce our two guest speakers. They are both board members, and I'm going to read through their bios, and as they come on stage, you'll get a chance to sort of see them and know them. First is Justice Brenda Tanita Pipestem. Her career is marked by her significant service on tribal courts, as well as her experience in both the executive and legislative branches of the federal government. Brenda presently serves as Associate Justice on the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian Supreme Court, a position she has held since 2000. She also serves as an Associate Justice on the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indian Supreme Court since 2008. In addition to her legal work, Brenda continues her cultural responsibilities as Gaduji, I believe. I forgot to ask Brenda, I'm sorry, working together to solve problems and address issues facing our communities. Justice Pipestem was raised on her ancestral family land on the foot of Soko Mountain, Wolftown, on the Qualla boundary of the Eastern Band of Cherokee. Living in DC following receiving her JD from Columbia Law, Brenda began service as the trustee for the National Museum of the American Indian, focusing on repatriation and successfully working with the Office of Repatriation to re-enter unknown human remains in their care. Now living in Oklahoma on the region of the Muskogee, Osage, and Cherokee nations or territories, Brenda continues to fulfill her cultural inherent community responsibilities of Gaduji, which means that working together to meet community needs through the board service to, which means the working together to meet community needs through board service to nonprofit organizations whose missions range from supporting college funding for Native students at the American Indian College Fund to indigenous management of natural resources globally at Nia Taro, to supporting the free texting crisis counseling at the crisis text line. Thank you again for being with us today, Brenda. And then we also have Kathy Baird, who is the Chief Communications Officer of the Washington Post and a marketing and communication strategist with 25 years of experience across Fortune 500 companies. At the Post, Kathy leads teams across multidisciplines, including corporate communications, public relations, Washington Post live events, and brand marketing. Prior to her work at the Post, Kathy was a senior global communications leader at Nike, focused on initiatives to create a healthier planet, active communities, and an equal paying field for all. She also co-chaired Nike's Native American Network and worked across partnerships and products centered in the indigenous community, including Nike N7. Before Nike, Kathy was the managing director and had Ogilvy's Washington, D.C. office and led the integrated marketing team while at Fleischman Hill and Fleischman Hillard in D.C. She served as an adjunct professor at the Georgetown University for 10 years in their master's in corporate communications and public relations school, where she taught strategic communications and leadership. Kathy is a Sikanju Lakota, an enrolled citizen of the Rose Band Sioux tribe, and is also a descendant of the United Nation of Wisconsin. So I thank you both for joining us today. And we had a little bit of a conversation about where we wanted to, focus the energy. And I think that there's something very great and valuable, just as a little bit of the transparency and where we'll start. When we were thinking of sort of wrapping up today, we thought about leadership and the roles and the context of leadership and what does it look like when you're in that role. On our team here at the College Fund, we're parceling out gender and having conversations about the roles of women, the roles of men. How do we highlight that? And how do we think about it? And so I wanted to start off with just a little bit, a very maybe pointed, but maybe not so pointed question of like, we'll start with you, Brenda, and then go to you, Kathy. When you think of the roles that you have taken on now in your professional life, and maybe even your personal life, like what values have sort of carried you through and sort of led and guide you over time to be here today?
Thanks, Jack. I also just before we get started, I just want to say when I was in DC was when I actually had the pleasure of meeting you for the very first time, and how I love how over the course of our lives, our paths are crossing once again. And so
Thank you.
it's really good to be here with you today, and great to be here with Kathy. Just, you know, it sharing our mutual virtual living room. I just wish I could reach over and hug you guys. So, with regard to, my values, who I am as a person is I'm a Cherokee woman, and I grew up on our family lands in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And my grandmother was a quiet matriarch, but she, through her life, instilled in me the values of being a Cherokee woman. And, you know, traditionally we're a matriarchal society, but we also, you know, it doesn't mean that women are on a higher plane than men. It's just that women and men have different roles to play. And as a woman, we have to look and recognize that and make sure that we are doing our part in upholding our communities, our societies, and that there's also a respect for the roles of men. And unfortunately, the kind of Western society and their historical placement of women kind of vertically beneath men has actually come into play. And that is something that we have to deal with both within our tribal communities today as well as outside of our tribal communities. Um, and it has, you know, it it takes some learning to navigate and to actually, continue to recognize when you are in different situations, either in your personal life or in your professional life, how to um, how to bring those values of equality into the workroom so that you can more effectively get the job done.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Jack. And he hani washte matako yape. Really nice to be here. As Jack said, I'm an enrolled citizen of Rosebud, and also of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. And it's really nice. Any day with spending time with Jack and Brenda is a good day, especially when we have this bougie living room we were all talking about. So let's see. I love this question of what does leadership look like to me, and I think in respect to my values, and I relate, very much to Brenda. My journey is that I was born in South Dakota. My family is also incredibly matriarchal. It was me and my mom and my grandma, and then my great grandma was still alive at the time too. So it was like 4 generations of very strong. I was a baby, but I was still strong, but strong and powerful women. And my mom was single and raised me on her own. So I did not grow up with a father in my life. I met him later. Turns out he's Irish. So that was interesting plot twist for me. But I think the being raised solely by my mom, and where we come from, those values are just part of how I watched my mom navigate our life together. When I was small, my mom wanted to come to DC for opportunity and employment. I ended up being raised here. I'm very much of an urban Indian. So I'm, I think it's somewhat upward of 60 to 70% of Native Americans are living outside of community. And for anyone who might be listening who has experienced that, I'm your girl. That's my story. But there's a lot of my background that I have found is very innate in who I am as a Native woman, which is my values and how I show up in a corporate culture. I've always been on boards that serve our community and done community work, but I've generally worked in places where there's not a high degree of Native population. Nike was a little different because we had N7 and I went to work there because of that. And it really attracted me about that opportunity. And we had a Native American network, which was amazing. But now I'm at the Post and I think I'm one of 2 Native employees here, which is really interesting. But the values I think that are important, that I know I bring to my workplace and I know have helped me be successful in the workplace are Native values: respect, humility, generosity, kindness, service, hospitality. When I show up, I'm here to help somebody else. Like I want to make the journalism and the journalists, I want to make that work better. How do I show up and show respect for that craft and the work that's done in reporting? And how do I make that better? How do I use my own platform and my own role to help make that better? How do I, show respect for at all levels, not just from my bosses, but also for my team and people who report to me who are just getting started in the workplace? How do I model good behavior so that I can show others, how you should show up as a leader in the workplace, how you should run teams and manage teams and be a boss to somebody, which, I didn't get a training for how to be a boss. And I think I've probably been through like management trainings, but a lot of the ways that I lead are really, frankly, very innate to my values as an Indigenous woman. It's interesting because it's not like I went to a school for that. It's because I watched my mom, I watched my grandma, I watched family, I watched other Native women in my circle, Brenda included. I watched the way you lead, Brenda. I learned from that. I watched the way you handle a meeting. I've watched the way women handle conflict and work to, find solutions to things. So I think, I just think, I can't say enough about my values. In fact, I'm in the process of writing. I have like roughly sketched out a book that I would write, which includes about Native values in the workplace and how different people, different Natives, leaders in our world, sort of represent certain values that are really kind of, I don't know, like pan-Indigenous, if you will, because I also find Brenda and I are from different tribes, and yet I relate to Brenda so much and how she shows up. And I admire her and want to emulate that too. Same with Cheryl Crazy Bull. It's the same thing. I'm around Cheryl and I instantly, we're from the same tribe, but I instantly feel like it's a family member. There's like a common closeness and a bond that I feel very strongly about.
Great, thank you. You kind of touched on something, Kathy, and maybe we can dig a little deeper in it. And then Brenda, I think about the journey, the professional journey, and the way it sort of comes to fruition. And then you talk about your installation of values through your mom. And I'm wondering, was there anybody along your path outside of your family that really, helped support, you thinking about your next iteration or guiding you in a path of, leadership, or just helping you keep going on? And like, what did they share? What did they do? We'll start with you, Kathy, and we'll go to you, Brenda.
Oh, me? Okay. Gosh, that's okay. It was good. I thought I had a little time to think about it. Well, I mean, I honestly can't say enough about Cheryl. She, I think mom and my grandma were like the best of friends. And Cheryl's very close to one of my aunts. And others in my family, Phil Baird, any Baird who's Indigenous is some relation to me, I'm sure. A lot of them are Oneidas, but I think, I would say it's both in and out of the community. I mean, number one, I would absolutely just say, my family rules the roost for me. Like they are my end all be all. Like my mom and my daughter is the 3 of us. And I watch the way they have handled situations. They teach me, even though I'm kind of the one I'm like sandwiched. So I'm helping them both, but they teach me a lot about how to show up and what they need and how I can treat other people better as well too. I think outside of that, I've had a couple of really core mentors. Again, I would count Cheryl in that equation. There's another woman in the DC area. She's a woman of color. She's the first Black CEO of a massive public relations firm. She runs Edelman, if anybody is in the public relations world. And I think Edelman helped with the NMAI opening, Brenda, which I think we talked about. But I think women of color in general have always been my go-to because, I am underrepresented in my field, and we are, and we are in corporate culture. There's not, there's you, and we also are, like about 3% of the US population. And so you take that down into corporate spaces. And I usually find the one other Native person who I work with. Nike was a little different.
Mhm.
But I've been able to also, have allyships with other groups. And, my friend Lisa has been one of those champions of me who's really been there for me. And I think, the thing for me that I need both mentorship with someone who, will help pep me up when I'm feeling down and champion me and, help build my self-esteem, which some days for some reason can still be kind of fragile. And I don't know what that is. It just comes with who I am. But the other thing I really need is someone who's going to be like very honest with me and direct and tell me the truth. I'm not here to make mistakes and not learn from them. I will make mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes, but I want to learn from those mistakes. I never want to be unteachable, or I never want to not be told things that I can learn. And I think that's something that, my friend, my CEO friend has been, she's great. I mean, she just cuts to the chase. Like, she does not sugarcoat anything for me. And I need a little bit of like the love, but also the tough love too, so that I am, I'm learning. I always just want to be learning.
Nice. I appreciate that you mentioned, because I know that we work with a lot of students and they're looking for mentors, they're looking for mentorship, or like, and I appreciate two things. One, the concept of friendship. So does that support system need to be a person who's in a mentoring role? Not necessarily. As you go through, as you find, that your peer is really powerful in sort of getting you through some tough times. And then also sort of thinking about in that mentorship space, because many of them get tied to the idea that I need to find a Native person, but you can find a lot of support in people in general. And you just sort of have to sort of figure out, like, what am I looking for and how am I thinking about the support I need? And I think that is something that we at the College Fund, strive to sort of be better about, helping students and scholars work through that dialogue for themselves. Brenda, do you have anything to add? Or what would you add, I guess?
I after undergraduate, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I took off 5 years trying to figure out what my next steps were. And I was fortunate enough to have my second job to be in Washington, D.C. with with a small organization called Orbis Associates. And Orbis was made up of Gwen Chunatona, who is Oto, and also Richard Nichols, who's from Santa Clara Pueblo, and Ann Litchfield, who is non-Indian. And that trio, that organization, being able to work with those two women and Richard, as well as another colleague who became a very dear friend and also a family member, Ted Hollipa. These four individuals really contributed to my professional growth. They all brought something different. So Ann Litchfield, I got out of Duke with a public policy degree, but I really learned writing and editing from Ann Litchfield. She had very exacting standards, and my first, getting out of Duke, I was, you think, oh, okay, I learned how to write. Well, my first few things that I wrote from her actually came back completely bloody with red ink. And, but, like Kathy, it's like, you want to be a forever learner. And so I really credit Ann with teaching me how to be a clear, concise writer. And then Gwen, who, as a professional woman and, a business owner, she was incredible in that she was living in DC, but her foundations were in the community. And that is where her heart was. And so she brought her full self to work every day. And Richard, Richard had gone to Harvard, and he did evaluation and program evaluation. And he was actually one of the first people to actually start building in culturally related evaluation tools, developing models to measure Native programs that actually would enable organizations to both culturally sensitive materials and culturally based materials, but also provide an evaluation model to those that went outside the norm. And so, I just can't credit enough kind of that pivotal point that they played in my life, because after working with them and trying to figure out what my next steps were, which was to go on to law school, I've carried those lessons from all of them every step of the way. And Ted, one of the things, one of the biggest professional lessons that I learned from him was that it doesn't matter where you are. If your heart is in the right place and you want to bring about change, you can do that. So before coming to DC, Ted actually worked within a tribal health clinic, and he was able to bring and actually hire the first Native medicine man to actually come in to that clinic and to be able to compensate him for his time, for the work that he was doing for people in the community. And, it's just recognizing that your experiences and your values add to and never take away from any endeavor that you want to take. And just to remember to do that, to bring all those things with you every day. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I love just the memory. I'm sorry, I'm going to tear up a little bit. Just the memory of somebody who's been very useful to your path, and you carry those things and those memories. It's always just a very sweet thing for me, because I think of the students that we work with and how hard it is sometimes for them to sort of own some of the things that they carry so dearly. Just to make decisions, like you can use some of that energy to be helpful for you to sort of like guide your path or think critically about the next step. So thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know why I got so touched by that, but I'm gonna own it. I'm tearing up. Cool. But along those lines, and you mentioned it, and I was thinking too, like what was in reflecting, and I will start with you, Brenda, so I'm giving you a heads up here. Reflecting on experiences, what is one or two, or maybe there are maybe a conglomerate that you can put into a category of experiences that really, were super pivotal in sort of helping you say, like, I'm going to do this in this way. Maybe it's not for the long term, like becoming, a justice and working for the tribes, but like, what was something that really helped hone your idea of, I have this energy, I have this capacity, and now I'm going to move forward in this direction? And what was a really powerful experience to sort of inform that? And then Kathy, after Brenda.
It's definitely not a singular experience. It is, I guess it started, I had a conversation with someone a couple of years ago, and it's okay, two things. One, I learned at an early age that not only that I needed to, but that I could advocate for my family. And in that context, it was healthcare. And that it was imperative that I advocate for my family, because the system at the time would have decided that my father's struggle with addiction defined him as less than human, and that by fighting and standing up for him and showing the hospital personnel his humanity, that we were able to get care for him, and being able to actually bring about change through the use of my voice. I learned that very early. And so that is something that I've done my entire career, both professionally, but also in how I spend my time outside of my professional work in my volunteer work. And that is, there has always been such an absence of Native voice, Native identity. And so living outside of my tribal community, I've always been an advocate for creating new space for Native people, and always trying to, whether it's with Native artists or with in education, when whatever schools my children were attending, making sure that there was accurate representation, making sure that my children were never in an environment where they were made to feel ashamed of who they were. And I never hesitated to fight that fight. And so there is kind of it was the absence of visibility, the absence that drove me into all the work that I've done. When I first went to law school, I couldn't even dream of being a Supreme Court justice on the Eastern Band of Cherokee Supreme Court, because the court did not even exist. And so, but I knew that it was imperative that we, as Native people, had a seat at the table in any profession where our passion lied, and mine was in the area of justice. And so that's what carried me on into law school. Kind of a singular event. It's one of the hardest things for me has been to not live in my tribal community. I went to college with every intention of going to college and coming back home and living my life out in Cherokee, North Carolina. And, but I had, when I went to college, I knew that I needed more. When you go through college, one of the things you learn when you graduate is just how much you don't know. And so I needed more experience, and I wanted more experience. And so I took advantage of an opportunity to go to DC, and ended up being in DC for 20 some years. And that was really hard. I missed not being home, because I do have responsibilities here, and I was very blessed to be able to serve on the court, which would bring me home professionally, as well as being able to come home and visit. But I recognize that it's not the same. And I was visiting with an elder in our community, and I was talking about just kind of how hard this challenge was for me. And one of the things that he said that gave me peace, kind of retrospectively, and this kind of finally full circle back to your question. And that was, he said, Brenda, he said, we're all given different gifts. Mm-hmm. And not everyone can or wants to live away from the community. That is an area in which you have been able to make a difference. And it's okay, because we need people outside of our community taking care of those things just as much as we need people at home taking care of the things at home. And so that really helped give me some peace about making those decisions to continue to walk through doors and to push open doors where I felt we needed to have a voice. And so two very different things, one kind of forward and the other kind of looking back, saying it's okay to do those things because it's all in the service of our people.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Wow, Brenda, I could listen to you for hours. And I agree, it's a very tough question because it's a journey. I mean, I think the most important thing for me is that I also am aware of that journey and those moments so that I don't take them for granted or like lose the perspective. And I'm like a real believer in miracles, and I'm nothing short of a miracle. Statistically, I should not be here. I shouldn't be alive. Number one, I wouldn't have made it to this age. Number two, I shouldn't be in a corporate chief communications officer position. I don't know of any Indigenous people in corporate America in the C-suite. I could go on and on and on. I just don't know how I got here, and I just have to say it's like just through my values of, trying to do the next right thing. I have a very strong relationship with Creator that really guides me. And I don't want something if it's not for me. So I don't want to push things to happen. That's something that I find is a bit of a disconnect for me in corporate culture. I'm not competitive, and I'm not in that way where I'm going to work and try to get it. I'm going to, if it happens, I'm going to accept that it's for me. And if it doesn't happen, I'm going to accept that Creator doesn't want that for me. And I don't want what's not mine. So I guess like in terms of those moments, I mean, I guess I'm really glad, Brenda, that you talked about addiction. I am in recovery, 26 years. And I think that's something that for me as a young woman, to have, again, nothing short of a miracle, to have been able to put down what I was using, to cope with life, which would have killed me, really, honestly, is really because I had a child young, and that sort of helped me recognize I needed to change. But that has helped guide me in so many ways, like the principles of how I view recovery, the principles that I believe, are a big spiritual component to how I guide myself in that way. And it's been really, those things for me have been transformative. I don't know who I would be. I probably wouldn't be if I didn't find that in my 20s. I think the other thing also is I remember this, and so as a result of that, I think the thing about like addiction and alcoholism, I will just say, is like, it's so much like those things, like the drug and the alcohol are like the symptoms, but it's like this whole way that we talk to ourselves and the perspective, and it has to do with self-esteem. And I think, as Native people and as a young woman, a young Indigenous woman growing up outside my community in Washington, D.C., with, in schools where there weren't a lot of other Native students, and feeling never fit in, ever fit in. The journey with self-esteem has been tough for me. And, it still is, my age now, like it's still something that I can't say, like I've solved this and it is always on. I always feel great about myself. It doesn't work that way. But I remember when I was, I decided that I was going to apply to graduate school. And so there were like all these things you had to do. Like I had my resume, and I had like I was already working at the time. It wasn't, it took me a while to decide that I wanted to do it. I had resume, I had letters of recommendation, I had like college transcripts and all of that. And I put it on my dining room table, and this is going to make me cry. I thought, who is this amazing person? Because I couldn't connect my person to that person on the paper. It was like I couldn't see myself in that way. I will never forget that moment for me. It didn't fix everything. It didn't. And I got into the school and I did the program and all of that. And it was really great and transformative because I was the only Indigenous person in my class, but I was in class with like people from Syria, people from all over the world, and just like that global experience for me was like, wow, the world is such a big place. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm getting, again, a miracle. I'm a miracle. Like that is like, statistically I shouldn't be there, but I was. And I guess the other thing I would just say is like, I think, when I went to work for Nike, a large part of what took me there is I had been working for like creative communications, public affairs, advertising agencies. And that was great. I really loved it. It was like a lot of different subject matter. I got to work on Native issues and for Native organizations sometimes, but I also worked on a lot of other things. And then I was recruited by Nike, and honestly, the main reason I joined is because of N7. I wasn't hired directly to work on that. I ended up working on it in my time there, but that for me was like the fact that there was a global brand that had had an ability to express representation for our community was a big draw. And I had 4 really amazing years there where I got to work on all the collections, work closely with Sam, work with the Native American Network, do new things for Nike, get them to see things differently from a Native person's perspective. I marched right up to like make sure that Nike understood my perspective on mascots. That was like within my first couple months, because I just couldn't be there without saying those things. And then the Redskins, I'm sorry, excuse me for saying the name, the Washington football team changed their name. So that was pretty an interesting time to be there. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess just that's the journey of my life. And I think, for me, when I think about reflecting on those experiences, the important thing is that I do, and that I do look at those, and that I have the ability to understand gratitude and appreciation for the gifts that I'm given. Like, I never want to lose sight of how lucky I am. Like, I am so lucky. I'm so fortunate. And I just hope that I will be able to bring that service, in more ways to my community. I always feel better when I am of service, but I always feel extra better when I'm of service to my community.
Great, thank you. I think that that's something that we try to communicate to our students too, is that, the journey is not, well, we talk about the word career, and I don't know if we are outfitted to follow that word, because I think that, in our hearts of hearts, we are travelers, and we like to explore, we like to do things. And so people are always hard pressed with, I want to become a lawyer, but I don't want to do it this way. And you're like, well, I don't know who told you how to do it that way, but okay. Or I have to leave, or I don't have to leave, or I don't want to leave, and trying to figure out how do we, land, I guess, sort of just enough experience to sort of open up our minds. I think I appreciate that most about the things that you both shared was it wasn't necessarily about leaving. It was more about like, there's a possibility of being enriched, and that intent to learn seems to be very powerful. So thank you for sharing. There's a question that adds to the depth of this too, and it was it's a good question, because I think about this, and I think about and I'll say it this way: I'm trying to draft a strategic direction for career readiness and employment for my team. And I was sharing this morning with a friend. I often wonder, is it my my choice, my decision, or am I really sort of taking in a lot of information from other people to sort of do some of this work? And I think that that's a very hard part to think about. Where do I go with how I want to show up and be useful, or how I want to be, a support to our community? So the question is, how do you figure out how you want to best help Native people? It's hard to know where to start because there's an overwhelming amount of problems to tackle. And I think that, it's in that, because it's how much do I trust myself to do something versus do I do what everybody else is telling me to do? And I'll say this and then I'll turn it over. Reading scholarship applications, sometimes everybody wants to solve diabetes, and you're like, there are thousands of people who are working on that now. How do you know, and how you be supportive to that? So I'll start there, and sort of looks like you, Brenda, had your hand up. So
I was going to say, it's don't listen to what everybody's telling you. You have to follow your passion. Find your passion, find your area of interest. And it doesn't have to be the thing that you're going to be interested in doing your entire life. Find something that you can that you want to spend your time doing, and learn as much as you can about that area. And regardless of what that subject area is, it's going to be useful to our community. And this was really brought home to me. I'm an attorney. My husband's an attorney. We both, believe in tribal sovereignty and work toward that. Um, we have 5 kids. My second son, he was in middle school, and he looked at me one day and he said, "Mom, I don't think I want to work for tribes." And I said, I kind of like really shocked. I was like, "What do you mean, honey?" And he said, I don't want to be a lawyer."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, honey, you don't have to be a lawyer. I want you to be who you want to be. I am here to help guide you, to help you figure out kind of where your areas of interest lie. And regardless of whatever that is, we need you. The Eastern Band of Cherokee needs you. Osage Nation, Oto, Missouri Tribe needs you. Native America on a national scale needs you. So find your passion, whatever that is, because we collectively are going to benefit from that by having you in these rooms where we may not be today. To have any professional area to start thinking about and incorporating us into the work that they do is beneficial for us, whether it's natives living in an urban environment or natives living on tribal lands. There really is no profession that you cannot contribute to. And I just really can't emphasize that enough. And that's why I raised my hand. I was like, "Oh, I've been here before." And the nice thing now is that we have a lot of people in a lot of different places that we might not, right? So if there's an area you're interested in, Indian country is pretty small. It's really 2 degrees of separation. It might be 3, but asking someone to say, "This is what I'm interested in. Do you know anyone?" And then having them identify someone for you to talk to. Because I can talk to you about going to law school, about what that path looks like, what you can do with a law degree. But I can't tell you anything about finance. But you know what? I know a couple of people who can. So that's my answer, Jack. Don't listen to other people.
Thank you so much. And just to pinpoint how small Indian country is, a really good friend of mine, Ethel Branch, Brenda, she calls me the Kevin Bacon of Indian country because everybody knows me, or I know them. So
exactly.
It's a very fun little. It is a small world, everyone. Just so you know, it's getting bigger, so I don't know everyone anymore, which is kind of a relief. So that's kind of. Kathy, what would you add?
You know most people, though. I mean, all of us are connected in different ways too. So.
Yes.
I love this question. And I think I would echo Brenda on the passion, but I would also say, in addition to the passion, I would add in what's the thing you're good at to that. So are you good at cooking? Are you good at sport? Like, in addition, if you're passionate about sport and you're a good writer, is there a way you can provide writing support in a sports related, right? Like, when we did a lot of sporting events with N7, and there was always the need to like, talk about the event that you were doing and like write around it and like and then maybe even write a story about it that could get published somewhere. That's getting visibility. So it might not be as linear as you think. And I think that's one of the things I feel is very much of a native value. Also, just the way I am, I'm not like binary in my thinking. Like, it's not either I'm helping my community or I'm not. And if I'm working in corporate America, you better believe I'm going to be representing Indigenous people here at the Washington Post. I have one reporter here, Dana Hedgepeth. Every day I talk to her, or at least a couple times a week. What are you working on? How are you getting visibility of our people? You know, I mean, and I'm not a journalist, you know, but I want to know that we have that representation, you know, of the way we're putting the stories out. I think, you know, the passion of like, if like I said, if you're passionate about education, you know, what can you do in the education community? Is there an organization, like for instance, College Fund? Is there a way that you can help with something you're good at? Like Brenda said, if you're good at finance, you know, can you weigh in? Can you add some like volunteering space in there? You know, the other thing I think about are like just places like language, you know, and music. How are you fluent in your native language? Guess what? A lot of us are not. You know, that's an opportunity to teach. How does that start? You know, there's like a lot of like Lakota language learning programs that really I've seen take off from the pandemic, where before the pandemic, I would have had to go to like North Dakota and spend 2 weeks in North Dakota. It's very hard to do. I would have a hard time doing that. But outside of the pandemic, there's so much more that I can do to learn, you know. So there's like technology. Are you good at technology? That's another space. I think, you know, all of our young people today are so much better at technology. We couldn't even turn the sound off on our computers a few minutes ago. You probably heard my emails going off. But I mean, everyone on this call is probably better at it than me and Brenda. You know, and I know, you know, just from like educating my mom, our elders need technology support too. You know, they want to communicate through social media. You know, that's a great source of that. What a great opportunity right there is just to think about, you know, I don't even know if there exists a program in Indigenous community around helping with technology for our elders. There, I mean, take it and run with it, my friends. But yeah, I think it's just not linear. You know, it's not you either are or aren't. I think it's finding your passion, what you're good at, and then identifying a few spaces to connect to. And like Brenda said, we are all connected to each other in so many ways that all you got to do is ask somebody. And that's the other thing I think, is just having the courage to ask for mentorships, for guidance, for support, for introductions. You know, I need to do a better job of those things. I needed that advice as a younger person. Those are hard for me. I always think, oh, this person doesn't want to hear from me. I got to call them up and tell them I'm looking for, you know, I always feel like I go into those, not necessarily championing myself. So make sure that you advocate for yourself, because you're going to be your own best advocate.
Great. And we're about at time, but I did want to share, the person who asked the question said a couple of things I'm going to pull out really quickly. She's talking about self-esteem, but through social media stream, especially in the days of technology. So building self-esteem in Indigenous communities. And then she's like, I was interested in ethics, but after hearing Justice Brenda Pipestem talk, I'm interested in justice. She's currently obtaining her MBA in Health Service Administration and has a bachelor's in nursing. So there's a lot in there, I think, even just sort of thinking about how does law interface with healthcare? And it's what is the concept of justice in there? And there's a lot of ethics work in healthcare. So I think that, you know, even just sort of mentioning that, Laverne, is super useful for all of us to hear, and we can be useful. Because somebody asked me the other day, like, how do I find medical experiences that could be useful for my edification when everybody keeps giving me environmental science, you know, opportunities? And I said, well, are you telling people that you want medical experiences? And then she just wrote, thank you. And I was just like, that's very helpful. So you share a little bit of that storyline so people can, you know, be helpful to your future. So as we wrap up, we're at time, and we have, you know, I'm going to extend it a little bit. But what are some really, you know, quick words of wisdom, some advice, or just something to say, like, take this, and I love how you said that, technology, run with it. You know, is there something very fun that you want to share with this group of attendees to sort of consider as they move forward in their journeys?
I think one of my closing thoughts is, don't ever let anybody tell you no. Let me rephrase that. I'm sorry. Got to rephrase that. Don't ever tell yourself that you can't do something.
Even better. Yes.
If you are interested in doing something, go for it. If you're willing to do the work, and you know what, if you get rejected, find out why you got rejected and then go work on it. and build your resume, build your experience, and then go back. If that's really what you want to do, persevere. You will get there. And about the don't let somebody tell you no, it's the if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. If somebody tells you no and you feel that you're qualified and in your heart of hearts, then you find another door to go through
Hmm.
because they don't know who you are. I remember whenever I'd gone to Duke as an undergrad, and then I took off 5 years. And coming from a small public high school, going to Duke, I struggled that first year. And so even though my grades had an upward trajectory, my overall kind of GPA, if you will, wasn't as strong as pre-law advisor, because even after being out of school for 4 years, I had to go back to the pre-law advisor to get them to sign off as I was making applications to law school. And the pre-law advisor said, well, looking at your transcript, I think you should consider these other schools. I don't even think you should basically bother applying. And he didn't know what I'd been doing for 4 years. And I was like, I'm sorry, this is where I'm going to apply. This is where I want to go. And it worked out. But if I had listened to the pre-law advisor who didn't know anything about me other than a number, right? And I never would have applied to law school. I never would have gotten accepted and graduated from Columbia Law School. So don't let it wasn't up to him who got into Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
It was up to the admissions officers who gets into Columbia and who doesn't. So I can't emphasize that enough, because too often people in different positions of power, if you will, they don't know who we are or what we bring to the table because they weren't educated. It's a lack of knowledge on their part, and maybe they're seeing us through lenses that are way less than clear. And so, as Kathy said, you have to learn to be your own advocate, because at the end of the day, you are your best advocate.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Brenda. Kathy?
I needed those words, Brenda.
We all need those words. We need to make a poster.
Something that a young woman had said that I really carried with me close to my heart. And she said she's working to change the narrative from "I'm so lucky to be here" to "they're so lucky to have me here." And I think that just sort of self-talk for me is something that I carry really close to me. But I think, I think on a couple of things, I would just say, like, you don't have to go about it alone. I think there's lots of my story and my situation where I think that feeling of being alone, or that there's no one like me, are just kind of, that kind of runs deep in my blood, for me anyway. And I think, there are many people who would love to mentor you and love to provide guidance. And I think it's, asking and finding those people. You do not have to do this alone. So I think that's one thing I would just say. Even if you're the only one in your family that's been in these situations, that is looking at schools, that are looking at these kinds of jobs, you are not alone. So I think it's just important, and like Brenda said, we're all just a couple of degrees away, from being connected, probably even being related to each other. The other is that self-advocacy. Again, like, no one is going to advocate for you like you will. And I think just practicing that and understanding how to tell your story and, what whether you want a job or you're working to get into a school, or whether you want to start a business, or, be a volunteer somewhere, just think about the talents you have and the strengths you have, and how you shape that story and how you position that in those conversations. That interview process can be kind of tough. It's kind of hard, but it's important that you know how to best serve yourself in those situations. And then the last thing I would say is just like a really high emphasis on self-care. I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but I also know many other Native women who can relate to this. Like I have needed to really address a lot of things, from generation upon generation in my own heart and soul. And many times, if I'm not kind of in line with Creator, I can really allow those things to take me in different ways that aren't healthy for me. And I have to, maintain a really strong degree of self-care. Our traumas run deep, very deep. And they are, sometimes just an hour away, waiting for me around the corner. The thing about, I think, our traumas is that for me, they will never go away for me. I know that it's in my blood, it's in my DNA, it's in our DNA. But I get better equipped, and I know tools now to know how to navigate those things. And I'm a believer in mental health, big believer in mental health. And I've experienced some tough times, with that. So I would just say I'm a believer that I need to make sure that I prioritize my well-being in that space. And the Creator wants that for me so that I can serve others. But it's really important that I do that for myself first.
Great. Thank you both today for your great words and your sentiment and your love. I hear a lot of really intense connection to the people that you represent, your communities that you're from, and I think that you also connect to the groups of people that you don't know. So I appreciate all the things that you've said today and shared.
Jack?
Yes.
Do you mind? I do want to just say one more thing to the students that we're listening to, that are here with us today. And it goes to what Kathy is saying, and that is to take care of we have to take care of our mental health and our spiritual health, and to remember that our traumas don't define us.
Mm-hmm.
We have learned skills to survive them, and those skills can be useful. And that's what makes us stronger. And at the end of it, just please remember that each one of us, we are the answers to our ancestors' prayers.
Mm-hmm.
We're still here. And the opportunities that you have today, they prayed for those things for us. And so we're not alone. And as hard as it may be, or as exciting as the day may be, those are all answers to prayers. So remember that.
Now I'm crying. Thanks a lot, Brenda. Well, thank you all for being here today. And I think that that wraps it up beautifully. I guess I'll turn it over to Erin.
Thank you, Jack.